Now the question is, now that I have my class or my blueprint, how can I create objects or instances from this class? I can actually start writing code in the same file, but the idea is that we organize things better. So I'm just going to add a new file here and do everything inside that one. Main one, don't forget .py extension. So basically inside this file, I want to import that customer class and start using it. Let's start with our main block. I can start write code under the main block, but I'm just going to create an extra menu method here. All right. So I'm going to write all my codes under this method. First thing first, we need to import that customer. So from the customer file, we want to import the customer class. Keep that in mind. In Python, you can have more than one class inside the file. Here we only have one class, but you can add as many classes as you want. And in case you want to import all classes from this file, you can just use this. In this case, we only have one, so I'm just going to mention it directly, which is going to be the customer class. Okay. Let's create an object from the customer class. So as soon as you type in the customer, if you hover your mouse on top of it, look what exactly appears. These are the doc strings that we added to the constructor that we created inside the customer. So for us to be able to create an object or instances from this class, we gotta call the constructor. Constructor is the method, is the first method that gets run as soon as we try to create an instance or object from this class. And what we usually do inside this method is that we initialize our attributes. Look at that. So we get all these values through the parameter. We use them to initialize our attributes with. So same thing here. So if I want, and look at that, look at these documentation. These are exactly the doc string and explanation that we added right here, which is nice. Now we know what parameters we need to actually provide values for here. Um, okay, so with the same order, I can actually provide values. So the first one is just going to be ID, so I'm just going to use one. And then the second one is going to be the first name. I'm just going to say Alice. The second one is going to be some last name, some random last name. And now the address. Yeah, good enough. And the phone number. Okay. Okay. We just created a customer object and I am going to assign it to a variable. So from this point forward, this variable is pointing to this object. So every time I use Alice, that means I am dealing with this object. Okay. Um, so there you go. I just provided values for the parameters. And as soon as I run this guy is going to call the constructor from the customer class. It's going to create an object, and then it's going to use these values to initialize all the attributes um, of this object, and we assign it to this variable Alice right there. I'm just going to also create another one. The other way that you can provide values for parameters is by mentioning the parameter name. So if you don't mention it like this, you have to follow the exact same order. But if you also mention the parameter name, you don't have to follow the orders. You can actually add things in different order So for example, you know what? I'm just gonna add last name first. Just so you can see, I'm changing the order of things. Some values and the phone number. Has to be a string. Right, I'm just gonna add one more here, also one more here. Okay, so there we go. That's another way of providing values for parameters when you call a constructor from a class. What's going to happen if I just print those objects? Let's look at them. Let's just format everything nicely. So Alice object. We're gonna print Alice here, and I'm gonna copy this. Now Bob object is going to be okay. So now if I just run this, let's just run it, make sure there's no error. Also look at the result. Look what I'm getting as a result. I'm just getting the memory location. So right now these two variables, these two objects are pointing to where this actual object is located inside the memory. That's why when you print them directly, it just shows them what they are actually holding, which is the memory location of this object, and Bob is holding the memory location of these objects. So these objects, these two object variables are pointing to part of the memory that is holding the actual objects. Could we get some details when we print objects directly like this instead of looking at the memory locations? The answer is yes. We can actually add a method inside our class which will be responsible for how output of an object should look like. Like when I want to print my object directly, which information should be printed when I print my object from that class directly. So if I just go back to this file, that method is called str. So this method is responsible how an object of this class should look like when we print that object directly. So what we usually do inside this method, we basically return a string value which is responsible for how an object should look like. So basically what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to print the first name and print the last name that I have inside this object. So I'm going to save this. Now let's go back and run this code one more time. So look what I'm getting now. So now when I print my object directly, what happens is that Python is going to look for that method. If I do have this method, which I do in this case, um, it's actually going to run that for me, which is the string that I personally formatted. So when we print an object from that class, that's going to be the information we can get from that specific object instead of seeing the memory location, which is a nice thing that we can do and have control on. Okay, now we have two objects. Okay, these two objects are completely independent from each other. Look at that. Like the first one is in a different part of the memory. the second one is also in a different part of the memory. So they are absolutely independent from each other, but both of them are following all those methods and blueprint that we created inside the customer class. So for example, now if I want to add something to this object, I can just call the add item on this object. So what happens here now, we are calling the add item method specifically for this object. And if you look back here, you can see what we are doing here. So we check the quantity, make sure it's not zero. If it's zero or less than zero, we're going to return false, and then we're going to loop through based on how many quantity we receive. We're just going to add that to the list of purchases for that specific object. So right now, Alice has all these attributes, and when I call the add item, so it's just going to run and add things to the list of purchases only and only for this object or Alice. So here I'm just going to add something, and let's just add two of these. Let's also add something. And if you don't remember what the add item method does and what type of input it gets, just hold your mouse on top of it. It shows you the doc string and the documentation we added there. So it shows you what these parameters are, what type they are, and what value this method should return, which is nice. So, all right, adding something here. Okay, now let's just call the method that we added, display card, which actually displays everything that we have inside the cards for these objects. All right, let me run this. Look at that. So now Alice has two things in her card. These two, and Bob has one item in his card. So things are working. So when we added things for Alice, it's just going to change the attributes for this specific object, which we called it Alice. How about we remove things? Does that going to affect the other one if we remove something from this one? Let's look at it. So remove item. So let's just remove one item from Alice's card. And then let's print them out again. See what happens now. Look at that. Now Alice has only one item left in her card. So once we change one of them, has no effect on the other one. These objects are completely independent from each other. What if I just want to know all the details about one of these objects? Like what was the name, first name of this object? What was the last name of this object? What was the address? It's easy. You just mention the object, and now you have access to all the attributes and methods that we added there. So we added address. Done. So that's how we can have access. There we go. That's the address just for this object, Alice. Awesome. So could we create a list of objects? Yeah, we can do that. Let's create a list of customer objects. In this case, we only have two. So I'm just going to add them right there. Can I add more objects now? Of course we can. I'm just going to create a new customer object right here and add it to the list of my customers. So now look at it. When we wanted to add new customer objects using procedural coding, things were all over the place. Now I can just easily add a new customer object to the list of customers. And once I do that, each element of this list has everything about each customer, all encapsulated in one place. Okay, now we have 3 customers here. Let's just loop through them and look at each one. So, see what we have inside each card for each customer. There we go. Alice has 1 item, Bob has 1 item, and Carla's card is empty. So, nice. Let's play more. So let's just buy something. Let's just pay for everything for Bob and then look at the cards. There we go. We just paid everything that we had inside Bob's card, and now as you can see, Bob bought what Bob had already inside his card. And now when we print all the cards, Alice has 1 item and Bob and Carla um, have nothing in their card. What else we can do? Okay, let's just add one more thing. Okay, let's just add um, let's just do something. If you recall that, there we go. So the add item method returns a Boolean value. So if something happens through the process of adding something to the card, for example, if you recall that we added this condition here, so if the quantity is 0 or less than 0, just return false. Let's test that. So right now we are using quantity as 0, so that means we cannot add this item to the card for Alice. So let's test it. So we're gonna print OK. Let me just get rid of that space and let's just look at all the cards again. All right. So look at that. We are getting false. That means we were not able to add anything to the Alice's card. And when we print the cards again, there we go. We still have 1 item in Alice's card.